The beginning of the end. The world had never known a threat like this. It started as a whisper in the news, a warning no one took seriously. Alien ships, massive and terrifying, appeared over Earth's cities. At first, people thought they were just another drill, maybe a new type of military exercise. But the ships didn't leave. They hovered above the world's capitals, their purpose unclear but undeniably ominous. Within days, the truth became undeniable. The aliens didn't come for diplomacy. They came for destruction. The first attack was swift, brutal, and without mercy. They didn't just bomb cities, they wiped them off the face of the earth. There were no warnings, no negotiations. Entire populations vanished in an instant. Governments, military leaders, and scientists scrambled for answers, but nothing worked. No weapon on Earth could match the might of the alien fleet. The people of Earth, once proud of their resilience, now found themselves facing extinction. Across the globe, panic spread like wildfire. But amid the fear and chaos, there were whispers of a different kind. Some people remembered something from humanity's distant past, a forgotten story, a legend about Earth's hidden power, a power buried deep in its core, waiting for the right moment to awaken. But that moment hadn't come yet. As the attacks continued, a collective sense of helplessness took hold of humanity. Governments crumbled. Millions were lost, and the aliens' relentless assault left nothing but ash and rubble in their wake. The world that had once been filled with bustling cities and thriving civilizations was now reduced to a graveyard of silence and destruction. Yet, in the heart of humanity, a spark of resistance was beginning to grow. At first, no one could see it. It was too small, too faint, like the first signs of a storm on the horizon. But for those paying attention, the signs were clear. Among the survivors, something was stirring. People who had once been strangers to each other were coming together. They began to fight back, not with conventional weapons, but with something much stronger: human will. It wasn't just soldiers taking up arms. It was doctors, farmers, teachers, and engineers. It was every person who refused to let their homes be destroyed without a fight. It was humanity's spirit rising from the ashes, a spirit that refused to bow to the invaders. In underground bunkers, makeshift command centers began to form. Leaders emerged from the chaos, not because of their titles or power, but because of their courage. They became symbols of hope in a world that had almost lost all hope. They inspired others to take action, to fight for their families, for their cities, for their very survival. Among these leaders was General Marcus Donovan, a man who had once lived a quiet life, now thrust into the role of humanity's last defense. He had seen the worst of what the aliens could do. He had witnessed the loss of entire populations, the fall of the greatest cities on Earth. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He believed in the human spirit. He knew that no matter how overwhelming the odds were, humanity had something the aliens didn't. They had heart. They had resilience. And that was the one thing the invaders hadn't counted on. In a hidden military facility deep beneath the mountains, General Donovan met with his advisors. They knew the time had come to take action. Earth's defenses had been shattered, but they were far from giving up. The alien ships loomed above, waiting to finish the job they had started. But General Donovan had an idea that had been hidden for centuries. "We need to tap into what's been buried beneath us," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The power beneath the Earth's surface, our last chance." His words were met with confusion. What power? What was he talking about? Donovan didn't have time to explain everything, but he knew they didn't have a choice. It was a gamble, a desperate move, but it was the only thing left that could save humanity. As he stood before the map of the Earth's underground, the realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to reclaim their world, to prevent it from falling into the hands of invaders who saw them as nothing more than insects to be crushed. A small group of scientists and engineers were given the task of discovering the secrets of Earth's core. The risk was immense. They didn't know exactly what would happen when they unleashed this power. Would it be their salvation, or would it destroy them all? There were no guarantees, only the grim certainty that they couldn't afford to sit back and wait for the aliens to finish their work. General Donovan looked out over the command center. The faces of the men and women working tirelessly beneath him reflected the same determination he felt. They were all driven by one goal: survival. In the chaos, they had found their strength. It wasn't in their weapons or their armies. It was in their unity, in their will to fight for what was theirs. They had no idea how long they would last, but one thing was certain: they were not going down without a fight. As the aliens prepared for their final assault, the human resistance stood ready. They knew that the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that they had something the invaders could never understand. The strength of the human spirit was far more powerful than any weapon. And so, in the darkest hour, with Earth's future hanging in the balance, humanity's warriors began their final march. The stage was set for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. The beginning of the end had arrived, but no one could predict just how this war would unfold. Would humanity's desperate gamble pay off, or would the invaders succeed in wiping out the last remnants of human civilization? The answers would soon become clear. The war had only just begun. The days after the meeting in the underground facility were tense. General Marcus Donovan had seen the determination in his men and women, but he could also sense their fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what they were about to unleash. No one knew exactly what the power beneath Earth's surface could do. It had been hidden away for centuries, lost to history, and to unearth it now was both a blessing and a curse. The facility where the scientists and engineers worked was nestled deep within a mountain range, far from prying eyes. The group working there was small, but they were humanity's last hope. The scientists had been given access to ancient texts and forgotten archives, and they had spent days analyzing every scrap of information they could find. But the more they studied, the more questions arose. There were mentions of an ancient energy buried deep in the Earth's core, an energy powerful enough to change the fate of the entire planet. But no one knew what it looked like, how to harness it, or even if it was real. As the team continued to dig deeper, General Donovan was left to oversee the preparations for the final fight against the alien invaders. The alien ships loomed overhead, casting long shadows over the cities below. Every day, the tension in the air grew thicker as the invaders prepared for their final strike. But humanity wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. "I don't care what it takes," Donovan told his advisors one morning, his voice resolute. "We need to find that power. If it's real, it's our only chance." His team worked tirelessly, day and night, to discover how to unlock the secrets hidden beneath the Earth's crust. The hours were long and morale was low, but there was a spark of hope that wouldn't die. The thought that they could turn the tables on the invaders, that they could use this ancient power to fight back, kept them going. Meanwhile, the alien fleet remained silent, its ships circling Earth like vultures waiting for the inevitable moment to strike. Their ships were invulnerable to Earth's weapons. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The thought of trying to fight them using conventional methods was as foolish as it was hopeless. But now, the power beneath the Earth's surface was their only option. In the depths of the mountain facility, a breakthrough came late one evening. A young engineer, Dr. Lena Jacobs, had been working on deciphering one of the old texts when something clicked. She rushed to the central command room, her face pale with excitement. "I think I've found it," she said breathlessly, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "The power. It's not just an energy source. It's a weapon." Donovan looked at her, his face hard but hopeful. "A weapon? What kind of weapon?" Dr. Jacobs hesitated, then spoke in a voice tinged with disbelief. "The texts talk about a force that could erase entire civilizations. It's not just energy. It's a weapon that could either save or destroy everything we know. The room fell silent. If this was true, it could be their salvation, but it could also be their doom. "We need to know more," Donovan said, his voice steady. "Find out everything you can. We don't have time to waste." As Dr. Jacobs and her team dove deeper into the ancient texts and the data they had gathered, they uncovered more fragments of information. The power beneath the earth was tied to an ancient civilization that had vanished long before humanity had ever existed. This civilization had discovered a source of unimaginable power, one that could bend the very fabric of reality. But in their arrogance, they had tried to control it, and the results had been catastrophic. The ancient civilization had been destroyed by their own creation, and the power had been sealed away deep beneath the earth's crust, hidden from the world for centuries. But now, that power was ready to be awakened. As the team pieced together the final pieces of the puzzle, they realized that the weapon was not a simple tool. It was a force that could only be controlled by the will of the humans who awakened it, and that control wasn't guaranteed. If they failed to wield it properly, the power could turn on them. It could destroy not just the invaders, but the entire planet. Donovan knew they had no choice. The alien fleet was preparing to launch their final attack. If they didn't unlock this power now, humanity was doomed. "We're running out of time," he said grimly as he gathered his team. "We'll move forward, but we have to be prepared for anything. If we're going to fight, we need every person on this team to give their all. This is our last chance." As the days passed, the team worked in overdrive. The ancient power was within their grasp, but unlocking it was a monumental task. They had to drill deeper into the Earth's crust, reaching a place no human had ever been before. The further they went, the more unstable the ground became. Tremors shook the facility. The workers began to grow uneasy. They were getting closer, but they didn't know what they were about to unleash. General Donovan paced in his office, waiting for any news. The alien fleet was on the move now. Earth's cities were already in ruins, and the people who had once lived there were either dead or in hiding. The battle for survival was no longer about fighting for land. It was about fighting for humanity's very existence. Then, late one night, a breakthrough came. The team had reached the heart of the power. They had drilled down to the ancient chamber where the energy source was stored. The walls of the chamber glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. But as they tried to access the power, something went wrong. The ground shook violently. The walls trembled. The facility's lights flickered and dimmed. Panic set in. It was as if the earth itself was reacting to what they had just disturbed. General Donovan rushed to the control room. "What's happening?" he demanded. Dr. Jacobs, her face pale with fear, looked up at him. "I don't know. The power, it's reacting to us. It's as if it's alive. We may have triggered something we can't control." Donovan's heart raced. "Get control of it. We don't have a choice now. We have to use it." But as the ground trembled beneath them, a terrifying thought crossed Donovan's mind. What if this was a mistake? What if humanity had just awakened something far worse than the invaders above? In that moment, as the power surged beneath their feet, the future of humanity seemed more uncertain than ever. Would the ancient power save them, or would it destroy them all? The countdown had begun. The war was about to reach its most dangerous and unpredictable chapter. And no one, not even General Donovan, knew how it would end. The ground trembled beneath them once more, the vibrations shaking the walls of the underground facility. It was as if the very earth itself was angry. General Marcus Donovan stood at the center of the command room, his hands clenched into fists, staring at the flickering monitor in front of him. "This is it," he muttered, his voice hoarse with both fear and resolve. The power they had awakened was no longer something they could control. It was alive, unpredictable, and growing stronger by the second. "Sir, we've reached critical levels," Dr. Lena Jacobs reported, her voice strained as she looked at the complex readings on the screen. "The energy, It's expanding at an exponential rate. If we don't contain it, the whole facility could collapse. Donovan's heart raced as he weighed the gravity of the situation. The alien fleet, now just days away from their final assault, had no idea what was coming. But humanity was in just as much danger. They had awoken a force beyond their comprehension, and it seemed that every moment they spent in its presence was pushing them closer to a disaster. "Do we have any way of stopping it?" Donovan asked, turning sharply toward Dr. Jacobs, who was desperately trying to stabilize the energy readings on the control panel. She shook her head. "We tried everything, General. The force is too powerful. We can't shut it off. All we can do now is try to control it, somehow." The team of scientists, engineers, and soldiers in the room exchanged nervous glances. Their only hope for survival was this unknown power buried deep within the earth, but it was clear now that they didn't know enough to handle it. The uncertainty was unbearable. "Then we'll have to make it work," Donovan said, his voice grim but resolute. "We have no other choice. We fight back, or we die." The silence in the room was deafening. No one spoke, but every person there understood the stakes. The alien invaders had already crushed humanity's defenses. The cities were in ruins, and millions of people were either dead or in hiding. The only thing left to fight with was this mysterious power, if they could even figure out how to use it. As they scrambled to adapt to the changing conditions, strange phenomena began to occur inside the facility. The lights flickered. Strange sounds echoed through the walls. It was as if the power itself was communicating, or perhaps trying to assert dominance over those who had disturbed it. The temperature in the room dropped, and a low, deep rumble reverberated through the floor beneath them. "Is this normal?" one of the engineers asked, his voice tinged with fear. "No," Dr. Jacobs whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "This is not normal. Something's wrong." Suddenly, the ground beneath the facility's control center gave way with a deafening crash. The entire building shook violently, throwing everyone to the ground. The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. A deep, guttural roar filled the air, so loud that it seemed to shake the very foundation of the mountain. "What the hell was that?" Donovan shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening noise. He struggled to get to his feet, reaching for his communicator, but the equipment was down. The only thing that remained was the unrelenting roar that seemed to grow louder with every passing second. It's the power," Dr. Jacobs said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's coming to life." A wave of realization hit Donovan like a punch to the gut. The force they had awakened wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. The energy beneath the Earth's surface was not a simple tool to be used against the invaders. It was something ancient, something alive. And now, they had disturbed it. "What do we do now?" one of the soldiers asked, panic rising in his voice. "We do what we have to do," Donovan said, steeling himself. "We survive, and we fight." The facility's structural integrity was crumbling. The tremors were intensifying, and the roar grew louder, more ferocious. Donovan could feel it now. The power was no longer something they could hope to control. It was a force that would either save them or destroy them. In the chaos, Dr. Jacobs managed to get a temporary power surge to her console, and the screens flickered back to life. "General, the readings are off the charts," she shouted. This power, it's a living, breathing entity. It's becoming more intelligent. It's learning from us." "Learning," Donovan repeated, his eyes widening. "It's adapting." "Yes," she confirmed, her voice tinged with fear. "It's evolving. I think it's becoming more aware of us, and it's angry." The force beneath them, this ancient power, wasn't just some forgotten relic. It was something that had been buried for a reason, and now it was awake. The question was, could humanity survive it? As the facility continued to shake, Donovan knew there was no turning back. The alien fleet was coming. The world above was already at war. And now, a new enemy, one of their own making, was about to reveal its true form. The power beneath the earth wasn't just a weapon against the invaders. It was a force that could tear humanity apart. Outside, the sky darkened, and the air crackled with static. Donovan stood in the control room, looking out over the horizon as the first signs of the alien fleet approached. But as he gazed into the distance, he knew that humanity faced not one, but two threats. The aliens were coming to finish what they had started, and the ancient power, alive and angry, was waiting to make its move. The future of humanity hung in the balance. The tremors beneath the earth had not ceased. With every passing moment, the ground seemed to grow angrier, the roar from below louder, almost as though it were a warning. General Marcus Donovan stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out into the deepening darkness. The alien fleet was still days away, but the constant earthquakes, the strange electrical disruptions, and the eerie sounds that reverberated from the core of the earth had become their constant companions. No one spoke of it directly, but they all felt the presence beneath their feet. It was alive, and it was far more powerful than they had ever anticipated. The air in the command center was thick with the smell of burning circuitry and ozone, the result of the strange electromagnetic storms that had begun to rip through the facility. Every electrical device seemed to falter as the power below surged with ever-increasing intensity. It wasn't just affecting their equipment, it was affecting the very fabric of the facility itself. Donovan couldn't afford to waste any more time. He turned to Dr. Lena Jacobs, who had been tirelessly trying to analyze the strange readings on the monitor, her face drawn and pale. "Dr. Jacobs, what are we dealing with here? How much longer can the facility hold up?" Donovan's voice was steady, but inside, he was fighting to keep control. The tension was palpable. Every moment they spent in the facility was one moment closer to the breaking point. Jacobs looked up from her console, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. "General, the readings are fluctuating wildly. It's almost as if the power source, whatever it is, has its own intelligence. It's no longer a static force. It's adapting, evolving." Donovan's heart sank. The idea of the power beneath the earth being alive was terrifying enough, but now it was evolving, growing smarter. That was something no one had prepared for. "We don't have time for speculation, Dr. Jacobs," Donovan said, trying to mask his own mounting anxiety. "Can we stop it? Can we regain control?" She hesitated, looking down at the flickering screen. I don't know. The power seems to be sentient now. It's reacting to us, to our actions. Whatever it is, it doesn't like being tampered with." "Great," Donovan muttered under his breath, his mind racing. "First, we have an alien invasion, and now we've awakened something we can't even comprehend." Just then, an explosion rocked the command center, throwing Donovan and his team off their feet. The sound of crashing metal and the screams of soldiers echoed through the corridors. Panic spread like wildfire as the facility's outer walls groaned and buckled under the strain of whatever force was now pulling at the Earth's very core. "Status report," Donovan barked, scrambling to his feet. A voice crackled through the comms, distorted and barely audible. "General, we have a breach. The facility, it's collapsing. We can't stop it." Before he could respond, the lights went out completely, plunging them into complete darkness. The hum of machinery, once a reassuring background noise, had stopped. A chilling silence enveloped the room, only broken by the sounds of distant explosions and the increasingly desperate shouts of his soldiers. And then the ground beneath them began to shake once more, but this time it wasn't just a rumble. This was different. This was something primal, something that felt as though the entire earth was protesting their presence. The walls trembled, and a deep growl, a sound like thunder rolling through the heavens, echoed from beneath the facility. The team froze, a collective shiver running down their spines. It was the same noise they had heard before, the one that had become the heartbeat of their nightmare. But now it was louder, more insistent. "Get to the escape pods," Donovan shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to get out of here now." The team scrambled to move, but they had barely reached the door when it slammed open, sending a gust of icy wind through the room. A shadow filled the doorway, a vast, hulking figure towering in the darkness. It was something that should not exist, something that had been awakened by humanity's foolishness. The figure moved closer, its shape distorted by the dim emergency lights. But one thing was clear. It was massive, powerful, and far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. "Move," Donovan screamed, pushing Jacobs toward the nearest exit. But the creature, if that was even what it was, didn't seem interested in them. Instead, it seemed to be heading toward something else. Perhaps it was drawn to the power they had disturbed. Perhaps it had been waiting, slumbering beneath the earth until the right moment came. Whatever it was, Donovan didn't care. All he knew was that they couldn't stay here any longer. He turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. The facility was collapsing around them, and the sound of falling debris echoed in his ears. The roar of the creature grew louder, and the ground seemed to buckle beneath him, making each step more difficult. As they reached the exit, Donovan risked a glance over his shoulder. The creature, whatever it was still moving, still coming closer. Its presence was overwhelming, like a dark cloud descending upon them, blocking out everything else. "Move," Donovan shouted again. "Hurry." But no matter how fast they ran, the creature's growl seemed to be right behind them, following them. It was relentless, and they could feel its presence, its hunger, its power. This was no longer just a fight for survival against alien invaders. This was a fight against something far older, far more dangerous than anything they could have ever imagined. They had awakened a force that was far beyond their control, and now it was coming for them. The escape pods launched with a deafening roar, ripping through the air and leaving behind the crumbling remains of the facility. Inside, General Donovan and Dr. Jacobs clung to their seats, the speed of their descent throwing their bodies into the restraints as the pod shot through the atmosphere. The shaking had stopped, but the tension was far from over. Outside, the world was a chaotic blur. Flashes of explosions, massive fireballs, and the flashing lights of emergency beacons could be seen from the small windows of the pod. Donovan's mind raced. He had seen war. He had seen destruction. But what they had unleashed beneath the earth was something different. It was something beyond their comprehension. "What is it, General?" Dr. Jacobs asked, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "What have we woken up?" Donovan didn't answer at first. His gaze remained fixed on the dark horizon of Earth below, the looming image of the distant alien fleet visible on the edge of space. He could see the faint outlines of the ships, hundreds of them, waiting like predators for the right moment to strike. "I don't know," he finally said, "but I'm starting to think it wasn't just the aliens we were supposed to worry about." As the pod continued its descent toward the Earth's surface, Donovan couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. The creature, the force they had disturbed, it wasn't just some mindless monster. It had intelligence. It had purpose, and it had been waiting, perhaps for millennia, for the moment to reveal itself. The sound of alarms pierced the air inside the pod as they neared the landing zone. The sensors flashed red, warning them of incoming obstacles. Donovan's grip tightened on the control panel as he steered the pod toward the designated landing zone, but the air was thick with a strange energy. He could feel it. The very atmosphere seemed charged, as if the planet itself were alive and angry. The electromagnetic disruptions that had been wreaking havoc on their equipment were only getting worse. "There's something down there," Dr. Jacobs whispered, her voice barely audible. "Something unnatural." Before Donovan could respond, a violent tremor shook the pod, sending it into a tailspin. The emergency lights flickered, and the autopilot began to malfunction. Donovan slammed his hands on the console, trying to regain control, but the pod was spiraling out of control, faster and faster. He glanced at Jacobs. "Hold on." The ground below was approaching too quickly, and as the pod broke through the last layer of clouds, they saw it. The surface of the Earth was no longer the same. The once lush forests and sprawling cities were now scorched, scared, and twisted, as if the planet itself had been wounded. Massive craters dotted the landscape, and in the distance, the alien ships were already engaging with whatever they had been called here to face. With a sickening crash, the pod slammed into the ground, tossing them both forward. The force of the impact was enough to knock the wind out of Donovan, and for a moment, everything went black. When he regained consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the heat. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. The pod had landed in the middle of a barren wasteland, surrounded by the wreckage of the once thriving Earth. Donovan forced himself to sit up, groaning from the pain. "We have to get out of here," he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the dizziness. Jacob stirred beside him. Her face was bruised, and she was struggling to stay awake. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice weak. Donovan scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing as he saw movement in the distance. Shapes, large and lumbering, were approaching. They were the creatures from the depths of the Earth. Massive, hulking figures, each one more terrifying than the last. Their bodies were covered in strange, jagged armor that seemed to pulse with energy, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "They're here," Donovan whispered. Dr. Jacobs pushed herself up, her eyes wide with fear. "What are they? Are they the same thing we awakened beneath the Earth?" Donovan nodded grimly. "I think so." The creatures were drawing closer, moving with terrifying speed. Each one seemed to be connected to the very Earth itself, as though they were part of the planet's life force. Their presence was overwhelming, and the closer they got, the more the ground beneath Donovan's feet seemed to tremble. "General, we need to move," Jacobs urged. "We can't stay here." He didn't need any further prompting. They both scrambled to their feet and ran toward the nearest ridge, hoping to find some form of shelter. But as they ran, the ground shook again, more violently than before. The massive figures behind them were closing in, their steps causing the Earth to quake with each footfall. They had to get to safety, but safety was no longer something that existed on Earth. Whatever these creatures were, they were part of the planet itself, and they were angry. Donovan's mind raced. There was no way they could fight these creatures, not with the alien fleet already waiting in orbit above them. The alien invaders had underestimated humanity, thinking they could wipe them out easily. But now, humanity was facing an entirely different challenge, one that had been waiting for them, hidden beneath the Earth for eons. And now, the real battle had begun. The creatures were closing in faster than they could run, and Donovan knew that their only hope was to find a way to communicate with the enemy, to figure out what they wanted, and somehow to turn the tide in their favor. The Earth had become a battleground, not just between humanity and aliens, but between two forces far older and more powerful than they could have imagined. The question remained, could they survive the fury of the unseen force that now stalked them? Or would humanity's final stand be crushed under the weight of an ancient power awakened by their own folly? The air was thick with the scent of smoke and the acrid taste of ozone. General Donovan's heart pounded in his chest as he and Dr. Jacobs sprinted across the desolate landscape, their feet kicking up clouds of dust with every step. The massive figures, the creatures that had once slumbered beneath the Earth, were closing in with terrifying speed. The ground shook under their colossal weight, and Donovan could hear the sounds of their footsteps reverberating through the air like thunder. Behind them, the alien ships hovered in the sky, their sleek, metallic bodies casting long shadows over the scorched Earth below. The invaders had been so sure of their victory. They had believed that humanity was weak, that their fleets would crush the Earth's defenses with ease. But they had not counted on the anger of the planet itself, nor the fury of the humans who had been pushed beyond the brink. We need to find cover, Dr. Jacobs shouted, her voice strained as she struggled to keep up with Donovan. Donovan didn't answer. He was too focused on the enormous figures that were now only a few hundred meters away. The creatures were like nothing he had ever seen. They were massive, towering over them with bodies that seemed to shift and pulse with raw energy. Each one was armored with jagged plates that seemed to be alive, throbbing with an unnatural light. We can't outrun them, Jacobs continued, her panic evident in her voice. What do we do? Donovan scanned the horizon, looking for any sign of shelter, anything that might offer them a chance to survive. But there was nothing. The landscape was barren, nothing but ruined cities and scorched earth for miles. The sky above was thick with the looming presence of the alien fleet, and the creatures from the depths of the earth were closing in faster than they could run. We fight, Donovan said, his voice firm. We fight, or we die trying. Jacobs turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Fight. We can't fight these things. There. I know what they are, Donovan interrupted. I've seen them. But we don't have a choice. We need to buy time for the rest of humanity to fight back. We need to show them that we're not afraid. Before Jacobs could respond, a loud, ear-splitting roar echoed across the wasteland. The creatures were now within striking distance, their enormous jaws opening wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. They were preparing to strike. Donovan grabbed Dr. Jacobs by the arm and pulled her toward a nearby ruined building. They had to take cover, but the creatures weren't far behind. He could hear their breath, ragged and heavy, getting closer with each passing second. The building was barely standing, its walls cracked and crumbling, but it offered a small amount of protection. They ducked behind a collapsed wall, hoping the creatures wouldn't find them. Donovan's mind raced, trying to think of a way to turn the tide. But the more he thought, the more it became clear. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about survival. And right now, survival was their only goal. Do you have any idea what they want? Jacobs asked breathlessly, her eyes scanning the approaching monsters. Donovan shook his head. No, but whatever it is, we need to stop them before it's too late. We're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for the future of this planet. Just as he spoke, a deafening crash echoed through the air. One of the massive creatures smashed through a nearby building, its glowing eyes scanning the area. It paused for a moment, as if sensing their presence. Donovan's heart skipped a beat. He motioned for Jacobs to stay low. Don't make a sound, he whispered. The creature's gaze passed over them, its eyes narrowing as it slowly advanced, sniffing the air. Donovan held his breath, praying that the creature wouldn't find them. For what felt like an eternity, they remained perfectly still, barely daring to move. Then, without warning, the creature let out another terrifying roar, this time followed by a blast of energy from its body. The ground shook violently as the blast struck a nearby building, sending debris flying into the air. The shockwave knocked Donovan and Jacobs off their feet, and for a moment, everything went black. When Donovan regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the ground, dazed and covered in dust. His ears were ringing and his vision blurred. Slowly, he pushed himself up, his muscles aching from the impact. Jacobs was beside him, her face smeared with dirt, but she was alive. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice weak but determined. Donovan nodded, though his mind was racing. The creatures were relentless. No matter how much they fought back, they seemed to be everywhere, rising from the depths of the earth, an unstoppable force of nature. And now, with the alien fleet above them, it seemed as though humanity's last hope was slipping away. "We need to move," Donovan said urgently. "We can't stay here. If those creatures catch us, we're finished." But as he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the ground, and the sky above began to flicker with strange lights. The alien ships, those once imposing invaders, suddenly began to retreat. The massive warships turned, their engines firing as they moved away from the planet. "What's going on?" Jacobs asked, confused. Donovan looked up in disbelief. For a moment, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but no, it was real. The alien ships were retreating, moving away from Earth at an astonishing speed. "It's them," Donovan whispered. "They're scared. Whatever these creatures are, they're more powerful than the alien fleet." The ground shook again, this time with a different kind of force. The creatures, sensing the alien ships retreating, seemed to pause, as though they were waiting for something. And then, as if on command, they turned their attention back to the humans. But this time, something had changed. The creatures, once mindless and chaotic, now seemed to move with purpose. They were no longer just destroying. They were looking for something. And Donovan had the sinking feeling that they were after him. Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked open, revealing a massive cavern. From the depths below, something even larger, even more terrifying, began to rise. The final battle had begun. And in this battle, humanity's fate would be decided. With nowhere left to run, Donovan and Jacobs braced themselves for the final confrontation. There was no escaping the fury of the unseen force. And now, they were the ones who would have to face it head-on. As the cavern opened wide, the monstrous figure began to emerge, and Donovan knew in his heart that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. Humanity's survival depended on this fight. Win or lose, there was no turning back. The Earth, the alien fleet, and the ancient creatures that had been awakened now stood at the crossroads of extinction and victory. The question remained, would humanity rise or fall under the weight of this final desperate battle? The cavern opened wide, its black depths swallowing the light as the enormous creature emerged from the shadows. It was unlike anything Donovan had ever imagined. Towering far above the ruined landscape, its form was a mixture of scales, rock, and pulsating energy. Its eyes, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light, fixed on Donovan and Dr. Jacobs. The ground trembled as the creature advanced, its massive feet sending shockwaves through the earth. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The air was thick with tension, and Donovan felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him like an iron vice. This was the final stand, the last fight for humanity's survival. And with the alien fleet retreating, humanity had no backup. They had no more hope except for the will to survive. The creature stopped, towering over them. Its immense body seemed to pulse with dark energy, as though the very essence of the earth was bound inside it. For a moment, Donovan could only stare, unable to fully comprehend the force they were facing. This was no mere beast. It was something ancient, something that had been buried beneath the earth for a reason. And now it was awake, unleashed, and angry. Jacobs stepped forward, her face grim but resolute. "We have to fight back, Donovan. We can't let this thing destroy everything we'd fought for." Donovan nodded, though his mind was racing. He knew they had no weapons capable of stopping this creature. No human-made technology, no matter how advanced, could even scratch its massive armor. But that didn't mean they were completely powerless. From the depths of the ruined city behind them, the remnants of humanity's forces began to rally. The soldiers who had once been on the front lines against the alien invaders now turned their attention to the massive threat that was before them. They weren't much, just a handful of survivors, but their resolve was strong. These soldiers had seen the worst, and they had lived through it. They were ready to face anything, because they knew what was at stake. "We need to get to the heart," Donovan said suddenly, his voice sharp. "The heart of the creature. It's the only way. We can't beat it from the outside." Dr. Jacobs blinked, confused. "The heart? What do you mean?" Donovan looked around. The creature was still standing motionless, but he could feel the raw power emanating from it. It was almost as if the very earth itself was alive with the energy of the creature. "I've seen it before," he said, his voice low and urgent. "In the ancient texts, The heart is a core of energy at the center of the creature's body. If we can destroy it, we can destroy the creature. We've got one shot at this. Jacobs looked around at the soldiers who had gathered, their weapons raised, ready to fight. They had no idea how to fight something like this, but Donovan knew they had to trust him. We don't have much time. If we don't act now, this thing will wipe us out before we even have a chance. The soldiers looked at one another, uncertainty in their eyes, but they trusted Donovan. They had no other choice. With no time to waste, they moved into formation, a plan starting to form in the chaos. Donovan turned to Jacobs. "Can you use the data from the old machines, the ones we salvaged from the alien ships? We might be able to hack them, find a way to pinpoint the heart." Jacobs didn't hesitate. "I'll do it, but you need to give me time." Time was something they didn't have, but Donovan knew that they had no choice but to trust in Jacobs' expertise. "You've got 5 minutes. That's all we can give you. If we don't destroy it then, humanity is done." As Jacobs began to work on the alien tech, Donovan signaled the soldiers to get into position. They would have to fight their way through the creature's defenses. With their weapons primed, they moved forward, preparing to face the unimaginable. The creature, sensing the growing threat, let out a terrible roar that shook the earth beneath their feet. The sky seemed to ripple with its energy as the massive creature lunged forward. Its movements were fast, too fast. The soldiers fired their weapons, but the creature's massive form was too powerful. The bullets and blasts bounced off its thick armor as if they were nothing. "Keep firing. Don't stop," Donovan shouted, his voice hoarse. The soldiers obeyed, but the creature was relentless, swinging its enormous claws and unleashing waves of destructive energy. Each strike sent shockwaves through the battlefield, knocking soldiers off their feet and sending debris flying. Despite the chaos, they kept moving, pushing forward. They knew that their best chance was to keep the creature distracted long enough for Jacobs to do her work. In the distance, Donovan could see Jacobs working feverishly, her hands flying over the alien tech, plugging wires and activating systems. Time was running out. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of humanity's survival resting on their shoulders. Finally, Jacob's voice crackled through the communicator. "I've got it. I've found the heart. It's located in the center of its chest. I'm sending the coordinates now." Donovan didn't wait. He nodded to the soldiers and gave the command to move in. With renewed urgency, they charged toward the creature. The battle had only just begun, but there was no time to waste. They had to get to the heart and destroy it before the creature could unleash its full fury. As they reached the creature's massive form, Donovan saw the heart, an immense, glowing core of energy pulsing within the creature's chest. It was beautiful in its power, but also terrifying. The light from it seemed to warp the air around them, and the energy it radiated was overwhelming. The soldiers climbed up the creature's body, dodging its attacks as they made their way to the center. Donovan and a small team of soldiers reached the heart, positioning themselves around it. They could feel the heat, the raw energy coursing through it, but there was no turning back now. Donovan placed a hand on the surface of the heart, and for a moment, he felt a surge of power, a connection to something ancient, something primal. Then, with a final, desperate push, he activated the weapon that would destroy the heart. A brilliant explosion of light erupted from the center of the creature's chest. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the air, and the ground trembled violently. The creature let out a final, deafening scream before collapsing, its massive form crumbling to the earth in a heap of destruction. Silence followed. The battlefield was eerily still. Humanity had won, but it had come at a great cost. The earth lay in ruins, and many lives had been lost in the battle. But in the end, humanity had survived. The creatures were gone. The alien threat had been vanquished, and the earth was free. Donovan stood, exhausted and battered, but alive. He looked around at the soldiers who had fought alongside him. their faces marked by determination and loss. They had come together, united in the face of extinction, and in that unity, they had found their strength. The war was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the scars of the battle would remain. For as long as humanity lived, the memory of this fight would linger in their hearts, and they would never forget the price of their survival.